Yes, here we go. I think it's recording. All right, guys, I hope this is recording. One more time, if you have any questions at any point in this review, just let me know, and I'd be super happy to talk about it. Maybe. Okay, so this homework, we were given a lot of starter code. And it was our job last night to fill in the missing pieces and tie it all together. So the first thing that I wanted to start this homework with, I already reviewed what is provided for you. So let's just jump right into it. First thing you want to do is npm install, which I already did, but I'll just do it again. There's no harm in doing that. While that's going on, I will go ahead and run my MongoD, as well as Mongo. So this should be second nature to you guys now. Doing it in your sleep, like we promised. Okay, so now we are given all these files in which we're supposed to write our code in. Like I said, there's no particular order. We kind of have to figure out what are we trying to do first and where are we going to do it and how. So given the user story, this is kind of how I like to build the apps, right? Based on the user story. So when a user logs in, they see a list of all signed up users' names. You know what, before I even read on, let's just get that to work. The very first part is when a user logs in, they see a list of all users' names. Now we have to think, where is this going to happen? And how are we going to do this? So let's go ahead and run Nodamon, make sure we don't have any errors. If you encounter errors at this point, make sure you actually have all your packages installed with npm install. Otherwise, you should have no errors because the code is set up for you. So let's check out localhost 3000. And this is what we are given, right? And again, all our login and sign up functionality is done because you guys reviewed that yesterday. So let's go ahead and sign us up. Actually, you know what, before I even do that, since I already worked on this app, let me just go ahead and drop my DB so I don't have any overlapping data. I'm just gonna double check what my database is called because that is called right here, ang bucket list. So let me go to use ang bucket list. I'm gonna show collections with show collections, and I should just have users. So just to check what users I have right now, yeah, I have a lot of users, so I'm just gonna go ahead and drop them for now, so you could start fresh. So if I go back up, I have absolutely no one, so that's where you wanna be. And same with you, if you find yourself changing your schemas a lot or not understanding why your data is not saving properly, last resort is to drop your database and just start fresh. And you can totally do that here in class, so feel comfortable with that. Okay, so now that our database is cleared and I know that now I can start fresh with new users, let's go ahead and sign someone up. I'm really lazy and I think you guys also don't have patience typing out everyone's full names and email addresses. So just for testing purposes, I'm just gonna write E's on all of them. And this will work because I don't have any validation, making sure my email is a legitimate email. That might be a fun reach goal for you guys during project week. So you can't just sign up with an email named E. But anyway, once we sign up, we are able to log in. So I'm gonna log in as E. And I see my name, welcome E. So the next thing I want to see is when I press login, it should redirect me back to the home page, right? And right now I'm still at login. And we could see that just by our URL up here. So let's go ahead and take a look where our login lives and see how we can change the state back to our index page. So there's a couple of moving pieces here, and I know it's really tough to be on top of them. I did not have coffee today, so, you know, shout out if I'm missing anything and be my prayer advice for me, please. I think you'll find in group projects, you're going to save a lot of time just because of the fact that you also have another pair of eyes looking at your work. Anyway, so let's go ahead and look for where this login form lives. It's right there. Let's take a look at our scripts as well. So we know that Colin has set up our home controller and our auth controller. And here's our login. When we log in, so I found the function here, we're saying go to index. What is index exactly? All right, let's take a look with our router.js. And if I can move it over. There we go. All right, so because this is given to us, it's really important to, make sure we understand what is actually going on before we add our own code on top of it, because that could end up breaking everything. So if we take a look, we're saying go to index. Here's our index state. Index state should go to just / and it should render the home template. So now we know that that looks good. Let's see what our home template looks like. And here is our home template. We have summer bucket list and list of all users. All right, so it looks like our home template exists, so why isn't it going to the index page? Well, let's figure this out. When I log out, there it is again. Let me try logging in again, see what could have possibly caused it. Okay, so nothing happens. That's weird to me. Let's figure this out together. I'm hoping we can come across every issue together. And I'm just gonna restart just to make sure it doesn't have anything to do with my database. Okay, so I know my E user exists. One more check. I like to test every step of the way, so I don't have to assume anything. Let's use the .pretty function to see our thing. And it does, in fact, exist in our database, especially working with our full stack mean. Because data shows up on our front end, you never want to assume it's actually saved to the back end. So always make sure and you test your database as well. All right, so now I'm actually kind of stumped at this point. Why is our state not switching? I know my router works because on homepage I can actually see my partial. So that's how I know my router is hooked up. If I didn't even see this, then I would have checked my router. That looks right. Let's see. You know what? I think it's because I have this random GetAllUsers. Let's see. Yeah, so why did I remove that? We're saying once we log in our user, we make a post request, which we know worked because we see the post request being posted here. So we know that that linked up properly. And upon response, it hit that function in there. And if I open up my console, I probably got an error. You know what? I can demonstrate whether that was the case or not. So let's go ahead and do this one more time. Okay, and yeah, so that was exactly it. There is a random error. It wasn't random at all. There is a function in here being called. Doesn't exist anywhere. We are going to use this though, so I'm just going to delete it for now, or I'll comment it out. And now if I log in, let's see if the error goes away and our index route actually gets hit. So the error is because it hit this function, doesn't exist, so the whole app just breaks and it never got to our redirect or our state.go. So again, paying attention to what code we have and how can we move on. So now that we commented out, we are able to reach our state.go index. And it shows the correct partial, which is our home page. And now we can move on. So I'm going to close router.js because we confirmed, at least for this part, our route has successfully rendered the home state. So now what we want to do is we still want to list all the users right here, right on our home page, whether perhaps whether it doesn't matter if we're logged in or out, maybe we just want a list regardless. So in order for us to do this, we want to basically, if I'm going to comment this, it'll be list all users, right? So I am going to, I suggested maybe we can make a GET request to our backend in our auth controller. Maybe we could have done it in home controller, that's no problem. But I kind of like keeping our, concerns separate, right? Separation of concerns. Our home controller right now is just dealing with our current user that is logged in or out. It looks pretty clean, it's very simple, so I don't want to pollute that controller. Our auth controller is dealing with all of our user stuff, right? Who is our current user, log in and log out. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a request in our auth controller. You could easily do it in lists as well, but because we're dealing with all the users, I'll just make all the user functionality in this auth controller. So I'm actually going to create this function now called GetAllUsers. So function GetAllUsers, and what this is going to do is make a call to backend and retrieve all the users. Okay, so let's write out our function. It'll be a HTTP call. We're making a GET request, so it'll be a .get. And we just want to call our user's controller. And let me explain this now. So now that we're making calls to our backend, let's go ahead and open up the user controller. Okay, so if you kind of like can follow along my mindset, all my user functionality in the front end is happening in the auth controller, and all my user functionality in the back end is happening in the user controller here. So I'm going to make a request to the user controller here, and we're going to hit this route, which is already built for us. And again, even though we're hitting root route, remember this route is actually referencing localhost 3000/users, and because you guys know this now, because you're so pro, we know that lives in our server.js, and we are saying any request coming to this user's resource, hit the user's controller. Okay, so that shouldn't be new. So so in that sense, we are hitting this GET request. All right, so if that's successful, if we successfully requested it, then we should get a response, and it should be the list of all users. And we also get a current user in our JSON file. So let's see, we can first of all console log our response. Right before we even like do functionality and assign stuff, let's just always make sure what we're actually getting back is what we think it is. So we think we're gonna get all the users. I haven't finished setting this up, so let's actually see what errors we get and how can we move on beyond that. So we're gonna log in as E. And line 57, I get my response. Wait, do I? Just, let's just double check. Line 57 on app.js. Line 57 on app.js is our response. And let's see what we get in our data. And there we go. There's our current user and our users. All right, and that's because we sent our JSON response right here. Cool, and the reason why this worked is because GetAllUsers now has, it's being invoked as soon as a user logs in. And before we didn't have this function, so it crashed, but now that we declared our function and we made a GET request, now there are no errors at this point. So we can just keep on going, and now that we know we have our user, let's go ahead and parse that data on the page. So I'm just going to create, within the scope of auth controller, let's say all users, and we want it to be equal to the users array. So let's find it. It'll be response.data, not current user, the dot users, yeah, no, we only have one for now. So let's go ahead and do that. Response.data.users. And here I'm just now setting, I declared it right here. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And I have now set that here. If that's the case, I also just, you know what, instead of testing it out back here, let's build out the view. We can also test by building out the view. So if I want a list, let's make a UL. And let's make a list. So let's put an ng repeat on the list item. Repeat, although for us there's only one, so we'll create a couple more users right now. Because my GetAllUsers function lives within my auth controller, and because, let's go back to our index page. And because we gave our nickname, we nicknamed the auth controller as lowercase auth, that's how we're going to be referencing any function in this controller. Same with list controller as list. Once we move on to that, anytime we need to reference a property or function in list, we're going to call it through list. But yeah, you don't ever have to assume. Just stick around and take a look at your code and make sure we're actually calling it in the right scope. We don't have any typos. I know typos have been a huge error this week. That's fine, but you know, I know it's really frustrating. All right, so we want to find all users in .all users. Yeah.
I'm tired. JSON. I'm very confused about how it's being used and just JSON in general. So when you did res.json, its primary purpose in this moment is to send information from the back end to the front end.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a JSON thing? Because like I said, I'm still very confused about like it in general.
Yeah, that's a good question. Right, in unit 3, we did like res.send, we did res.render, and we used those because we didn't have, well, in simple terms, a front-end framework. So with this, because we have a front-end framework that can receive big data objects, what we're doing is sending a JSON object. And JSON object is just JavaScript object. That's just a fancy acronym for an object. So we're sending an object with a key value of users and the value of the users itself from the results of our query for finding. So just like before in unit 2, we did like res.render, and my syntax is totally wrong here. And then we would send like users, right? And we would just wrap it in an object. We're doing the exact same here, but we're sending just an object and no rendering. So once we send this object, we are able to receive it on this end with our HTTP call through our response. So this response should be the exact same thing as this JSON object, and it is. And we can confirm that by console logging it. And when we console log it, here is that whole JSON object listed within our data here. So this is our response, and then our JSON object comes with our users and current user and all the information coming from back there. Okay, and because we have this object now, we are now on the front end, we can now save that information so that when we save it, we can now access it on our views. So we're just passing data from the back to the front with an AJAX call through JSON, save it to our front end, and our front end now can access that stuff. So now we're here, all users. Let's go ahead, and you guys, I think, are really good at ng repeats at this point. So let's go ahead and parse that. So the user here, remember, is, let's go ahead and do that. I know it's repetitive, but it's good to understand what we're dealing with before we start parsing into it. Anyway, so we do user in auth all users, nothing shows up. Let me make sure I saved everything, and let me just refresh the page as well. And I am constantly logging people in and out. If that bugs you, go ahead and set your cookies to expire later. Anyway, so yeah, refreshing helps, and we are able to see the user object, right? I think one really confusing thing is we use the same variables everywhere, ever since, unit 2. So just make sure you know what you're actually calling. So if your user isn't rendering on the page, or whatever you want isn't rendering on the page, make sure you understand how you're actually defining it. And in this case, we called it user. You can name it whatever you like. So anyway, we just want the user name. So let's look for that. And because this is just an object, remember, we could just access the value in an object by simple dot notation. So now that I did user.name, let's go ahead and refresh this. And now we should see E. All right. You know what? Just to move on, let me just make a couple more users. Okay, now I see W, so at least I know all this is working. Even on my logout, when my user isn't logged in, I could still see that. Let me make one more. Q. Okay, we can work off of Q, that's fine. So currently we're at Q now. I'm able to see all my users. Okay, now what do I do? All right. So what I want to do is, if I click on anyone that's not me, I don't want it to do anything. But if it is me, I want it to go to my show page. Okay, so that means we probably want a click event. We could do that. So that's what I'll do, right? Just saying these things out loud will help you kind of understand what you want to do next. If I click on this, then I want my page to show. So let's go ahead and put a click event on the LI. Remember, you can put multiple directives on an HTML element. So let's put an ng click on the list. And remember, you do not have to just put click events on buttons. You can put click events on anything. So now, this is where I will, let me know if you have questions. I will now start filling out my list controller. Because going from here, I want all my functionality. It's basically adding list, retrieving list, editing list. So I'm going to go ahead and move to my list controller. And maybe let's do var self. You know what? Again, I'll just do list in case I forget what my controller name is. Var list equals this. And maybe I want to create a function that says show user. List show user equals show user. Okay, and then let's actually write out that function right here. So function show user. And again, before I even write out my function, I just want to make sure my click event is actually hooked up to the right controller, because maybe you have a typo, and then, you know, the less amount of code you have, the easier it'll be to debug at that point. So what I want to do is I just want to invoke this function in here. And upon success, it'll say clicked. If not, then I know something's wrong and we can debug that. But if you take a look at our LI, we have two actions referencing two controllers. There's my daily siren, sorry. One is making a call to auth, one is making a call to list. You can do whatever you want, and I think that's what's like beautiful about Angular and yet frustrating at the same time, because it's like, what? What are the rules? There are no rules. Okay. So let's go ahead and, I forgot, Q, sure. If I click on Q or E, I'm supposed to see my quick events, right? And nothing's happening. Did I already refresh this? Learn from my mistakes. Hard refresh. Hard refresh is Control R. Control R? Option, Command R. Okay, yeah, so I just didn't hard refresh it. So refreshing the page made my click event work, and now I know on any list item, my click event works. If I click on anything else, that means my click event is fine. So once you are confirmed that your click events works, now let's go ahead and build this out. What are we trying to do here? What am I trying to do? So what I'm trying to do is when clicked, I want to change state to the user show page. When I click on that, I want to go to my user show page. In order for me to go to the user show page, I have to think change state. So I could do that. Go in English, we want to go to user page. And then as programmers, we know what that means is we have to change the state to the user show page. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. That means we probably want to make another HTTP request, right? To our user show route. So again, I have the user controller here. We want to hit this route now. And because we already have this authorized middleware in here, we're saying if you are the current logged in user, we can go ahead and get the information for the current logged in user. If you're not logged in and you're trying to access this, we're going to say do nothing. Okay, so let's make a request over there, / and again, where are we making requests? All routes on this page are making requests to this route. Let's go ahead and do users. And I know it's very tempting to do something like that, but that's not the right syntax here. We would want the actual ID of the current user, right? So before we can even finish this route, how can we grab, it's always like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, because each piece is like so involved with a lot of stuff. So how can we grab user ID? So let me write this down. And you should feel comfortable doing this too. Instead of trying to do 20 things at once, try to do one thing at a time. How can I grab the user ID? Right, in order for me to even hit that route, I need to grab the ID. We have many options here, but I'm gonna go ahead and grab the logged in user through the home controller, right? For example, we even know who is logged in. I can see my name here. And that's grabbed by doing home.currentuser.name. If you want to see it, you could take a look. I think that's on the index page. Yeah, welcome home.currentuser.email. And for us, we could just do .name. So we're going to access it just the same way in here. So we're done with that. Again, if you have too many files open, just be careful. We could do it that way. So that's one, if we do like home.currentuser.id. But also in my repeat, I already have my user. And as I saw in my response, I see my full user object. So there's my first one, right? And my ID is saved in that user object. So maybe I could just reference it as user._ID. All right, so I declared my user, I could see the name, now I'm just gonna pass in the ID number. So that's the route I'm gonna take. You can do whatever you like. And you know what, I'll just call this, I'll call this user ID. And again, I work slow, but you know, at least I know I won't have bugs. At least that's what I am assuming. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna console log ID. Am I actually grabbing it? I think I am, but am I really? So again, this is a click event. So if I click on Q, I get my ID number. I can confirm this many ways as well. I can check the data itself. So Q is the last one. So that should be here. Okay, I look at the last 4 digits, 9BCB, 9BCB. So it is in fact the current logged in user's ID number. And because I've confirmed that, I'm gonna move on. Now, if your ID numbers don't match, then make sure you're actually declaring your user properly or that you're grabbing the correct user's ID. Again, don't assume. I'm gonna say that over and over and over and over. All right, so now we can go ahead and make this HTTP call now that we have the user ID. You could use string literals. I'll go ahead and just tack on the user ID like that. And since it's just a GET request, I don't need to send anything else. So let's go ahead and look for the response. Response. And according to this, if it's successful and it passes the middleware check, then I will get a response of just a JSON object of the current logged in user. Else I won't get a response, and it just, at this point, it does nothing. It'll just stop and it'll run an error. Okay, so let's go ahead and console log this response. Right. Console log response. Usually my walkthroughs are more like how to debug, how to understand what the next step is, how to test. If I click on any of these, I'll get those, the object response. So, okay, if I click on Q, right, because I'm currently logged in as Q, here's my response. And my response lives in my data, and there's my user object, right? That's exactly what was passed back here. And now I'm able to see user. And again, there's my 9BCB. That means it passed the middleware check. Okay, so now that that's happened, you know what? Let me see what the other guys show. I'm going to type clear. Oh, clear to clear up my console. Clicking on E, let's see what this was. Okay, so if you look under, when I click on E, I get a status 401. I don't even get data back. Same with W. If I click on data, I don't get my user object, I get status 401, meaning it did not meet my middleware requirements, so 401 means there's an error. So maybe what I want is, and I'm good with that, so I'm going to comment that out. Maybe what I want is if my response.data.status, right? I think that's what that's called, data.status. If my data.status gives me a 401, then now we could do multiple things. We could maybe display a message on the page saying like, maybe we could have it here, that you are not authorized to view it, or maybe show a full page saying 401, you know, sorry, or maybe we want to just show our login form. It's really up to you what you want to do. But I'm just simply going to have it do nothing. I'm just going to have a return. And remember in just basic JavaScript, anytime JavaScript reads the keyword return, it stops right there. So we'll just stop it. If we get a error 401, do nothing. And that's what I mean by do nothing. If I get an error, do nothing. Else, let's go ahead and continue then. So I could do, so we're in my list controller and I called this list. Don't get confused that, you know, here it's called self. I think a lot of you guys like also even shortened even further, like if main controller will be MC, that's fine, that's fine. As long as you know what you're referencing. So now I'm gonna create this new thing called user list. It's not defined anywhere, I'm just gonna create it right now. Let's set it equal to my response.data.user, right? So again, referencing, not this one. Let's go ahead and clear that out. We're logged in as Q. We want Q's list, my list as Q. Ugh, I'm logged out already. Hard reset, hard reset. Q, Q, Q. Click on Q. Was this it? Is this 57? No. Oh, right. Oh, I commented out my response. It's fine. But it was under list, user.list. Okay, what am I going to do with this? Why am I doing this? Well, I want to save that current list so that way I can now manipulate that list. Okay, but it's confusing because we're not even on that show page yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Let us change our state. When I click on this, we're going to change state. So I want to go to the user state page. User, what's the syntax on this? Comma, and then any data you want to pass through it. So yes, I need to pass data so that we know it's this specific user. So I'm going to say user ID, and I'm just declaring this now, but I'm going to set it equal to the ID we've passed all the way from our show page. So it's trickling up their controller, and we're going to pass it yet again to state.go. Lots and lots and lots of movement with our data. User ID. All right. Okay, so that's our state.go. Let me check my router one more time. So we're saying if I go to state named user, let's finish this out. The URL I want it to show is going to be our user page, right? So I named it user HTML. And we could just call this user. Do I want to do that? The short answer is no, because then there's no way to really reference the current logged in user. So I'm going to go ahead and attach an ID parameter right after that. And lastly, what view do I want to show? So partials user.html. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, I'm going to close that. All right, let's refresh everything. And hopefully what's supposed to happen is when I click on Q, I get shown on my page. And there we go. Let me go back. If I click on E, nothing happens. W, nothing happens, because again, I am satisfying this 401 error, and it just stops. Otherwise, here's my page. Now, I just want to make sure that is actually my page. It's blank, so we can go ahead and fill it out. I'm done with home.html. Looks like my home page works, whether I'm logged in or out, so I'm going to go ahead and close it. So now we can move on to our user page. Hooray! Slow and steady. Yeah, so my user page is empty. Let's just double check and make sure our view is actually hooked up properly. And I probably forgot to hard reset. Again. And there's our user page. There's nothing like that panic of, oh my gosh, did I break everything? And nope, you just forgot to save. You just forgot to reload. All right, so we're in the right page. Okay, now this is where the rest of the homework lives. If you got this far, you did great. There's not that much code, but it was a lot of thinking. There's a lot of making sure we know what we're trying to do. And all we did was write one function, GetAllUsers, to grab all the users for the front page. And then here we just have a showUser function that simply changes the state and passes the user ID to that state. Oh, man. All right, so let's see how much we can get done in the next 20 minutes. All right, so now that's done. Now that we're here, we're thinking, okay, what do we want to do here? I want to be able to create a new list. So let's go ahead and do that, because I can't really view the lists. I can't edit the list until I actually make a list. All right, so what do I want to do? I want to make a list. Okay. So that means we're going to want a form. All right, let's just throw in a simple form in the front page. So we could do form. Do I need all that stuff? No, I don't need this stuff. Those are the old days. Here, though, we can attach ng submit, maybe? Yeah, let's put an ng submit on this form. What it's saying is when the form is submitted, meaning once like a button gets clicked, it's gonna run this function. It's kind of the same thing as an ng click, but it's pertaining to forms only. So when I click this, you know what, we'll think about the submit later. Let's go ahead and actually write out the form, right? It's like, focus, Christine, one thing at a time. Okay, so I do want a text box. I don't really need this stuff either, thanks to Angular. Instead of name and value, I could just go ahead and use the magic of ng model. And the value of this box, I can just call it whatever I want. So I'm gonna call this list.newList. And we put list in front of it because it lives within the scope still of our list controller. And I'm just gonna call it new list. I don't need to declare it anywhere. I know that's really weird, but that's what ng model allows us to do. It gets instantiated the moment we declare it in our ng model. Okay, and then the final part of our form, besides our text box, we need a way to submit it. So let's go ahead and I'll just use a button. And I'll call this add to list. Add to list, yeah. Add to list. There's a beautiful form. So let's go ahead and make sure our form shows up. I don't think there would be a problem. You never know though. You never know. Okay. And there's our beautiful list. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so now let's go ahead and write our submit. Again, you could do an ng click on the button, that's fine. I mean, you do whatever you like, but I'm gonna go ahead and use ng submit. So what we're saying is when we submit the list, let's go ahead and have it fire another function in the list controller. And we could call this, maybe I could call this save list. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. I think you understand how slowly I work here, build things out one by one by one by one. Make sure we're actually doing that. At this point, you will get an error. It'll say save list is undefined. So don't forget to declare it up here or down there. It doesn't really matter where you declare it. And this will be save list. Again, I just like calling my controller list because now I know exactly this is calling the list controller, for example. And I know that it corresponds to this guy. Okay, so when I save list, it should fire this button. Okay, let me do this. Whew, one more time. Hopefully you being sick of seeing me do this will actually help you, you know, test every step of the way. This is like my subliminal messaging. Okay, so now if I click the button, there's no ng click, but my ng submit still works just the same, and my save list function fires, and now I can move on with this function. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so if I want to save this, let's go ahead and see what we're trying to do now with this function, right? Our previous function, we were doing a lot. And this function, let's see what we're trying to do. We just want to save the list to the database. And do we want it to redirect? No, we just want it to show on the page. So maybe that's just it. Maybe it's just an HTTP call. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and make that. We want to hit this route now. Oh, no, we're done with the user controller. Remember, if we're gonna make a post request to users, it's gonna try to make a new user. So that's not the route we wanna hit. So goodbye users, we don't need you anymore. We can finally use our list controller. And this is where our list controller comes into play. So all routes coming in here is localhost 3000 /user/ID /lists. And just to make things super duper duper clear, we know it because on server.js, we said any request coming to this route, hit the list controller. Okay. All right, so we want to make a post request. So now we could do, we're dealing with 3 things at a time now. And if it helps you to, set up your monitor this way, go for it, instead of having like a million tabs open and and like 1,000 terminals open. Let's just focus on this. Okay, so let me start here. I want to make a post request. So let's go ahead and do post. And I'm just going to leave it at that. That way I know I'm making a post request. Nothing's going to happen because it doesn't exist yet, right? So back here, let's do a dot post. And we just want to hit it at root route. Well, back in the day when you thought you'd never remember this stuff, you already know it off the top of your head. And I'm just going to say, okay, so again, my process here is setting up my 2 routes, making sure they're actually linked up together. If they are, then go ahead and proceed with saving things to my database. All right, but we need a lot more information, right? It's not that easy. We still have to like somehow how do we pass the list we just made all the way back there? No worries. So that means we probably want to add an ID to it, right? We want to say this particular, let me call this list ID, not to be confused with our user ID. So let's call this list ID. I want to save a particular list. And if my route back here is asking for an ID number, that means I have to pass in an ID number here, which means I probably should pass an ID number through here. So let's do that. So just like we did with users, we can access the user ID because we declared the user on the page. So now that we have list here, how can we access the list? Well, that was the whole point of me adding this variable in my show user route. In our this.user list, it has the list of all our users' lists. This sounds like a tongue twister. There's so many, I'm just repeating the same words. I hope you can follow along. If not, feel free to stop me. I assume that, what I'm seeing in my head makes sense to you guys here. Anyway, all right, so we need the ID number. And the point of all this is not easy, guys. It takes a lot of thought. So if you're banging your head against the wall, that's fine. That's okay. All right, so we know that I want to pass an ID. So let me go ahead and write that in, right? Because if I'm going to make a post request to user / I need the user ID now. Yeah, I need the user ID. So I'm just gonna hard code that here. Feel free to hard code, it doesn't have to ever be perfect. Then we're gonna hit the lists route, right, to correspond to here. And then I need my list ID. So list ID. So I know in general I want to make a post request, but how do I still populate these values? And this is what makes this tricky. Okay, so let's see, how can we do this? I can pass the user ID part. Let's figure that part out first, right? Because I can't even get to this unless I know what my current user is. So remember, our home controller is our parent controller over everything. I will show you again our index page just to kind of visualize exactly what's going on. Our home controller is where our current user is stored. That means any child controllers have access to anything that is under home. So that being the case, I could just get the user ID knowing that information. So I'll go ahead and pass in home.currentuser.id. And if you want to test it out, feel free. Right now, this should correspond to here. If I console log ID, we should see the user ID. If that helps to visualize it, I'd be happy to do that. You know what, it's hard to refresh. Home controller is not a function. Got undefined. Let's see. Missing a parentheses. Oh yeah, hello. I'm giving it horrible syntax. So let me go ahead and comment that out. So all we want to do, and I'm missing my brackets. All I'm going to do is I'm passing in current user ID. It's not even within my controller, but it technically is because I am a child controller of the home. And if all goes according to plan, we should be able to see the current logged in user. Again, this is just one way to do it. We have users saved kind of everywhere. So feel free to play around with different methods to grab the user ID. But the point of this is just to show you how there's one way to do it. Okay, so I get undefined. That's good to know that it's not what I think it is. So let's go ahead and check my syntax here, home.current.id. How are we saving this user? Current user is right here. Is it just ID number? I swear, I know grabbing ID numbers with or without the underscore, you just have to test it out and see what it actually is. Okay, so my user is still undefined. Why is that? So home.current user, it should be underscore ID. I shouldn't have to be guessing this.
If your response is holds your user ID, couldn't you check inside there to see how it's listed?
Can you say that one more time?
So back on your console log, the object that you are sending back to yourself on 57, that's the current user. So wouldn't it list how the current user ID is expected to be sent to you?
Yeah, yes. Yeah,
So
that'll be one way. So the reason why I'm accessing it through home is I just want to get a working example of you can grab data in other controllers. Namely, what I'm trying to do is get it from the parent controller. I have a feeling I'm just missing something very small. Because that should work. I'm gonna try one more time. I don't see, I'm pretty sure that's the correct syntax with the underscore ID.
Yeah, I think Alejandro was saying on Slack that you didn't save it with the underscore user ID before you tested that.
Oh my gosh. Say it out loud.
But she just did it, both of those things already.
Oh no, she saved it after she changed it, so it never
got. No. Alejandro, you're right. I just didn't save it. Yeah, so, don't beat yourself up. Yeah, so.
Everything was correct. It was just you forgot to save Autumn and then the thing.
Story of our lives. Yeah, so yeah, it is underscore ID. We are able to see our current user ID, and as we know now, 9BCB is our ID. So now we got that part. Okay, maybe in the next 3 minutes I can somehow get our list ID. You want to do that? I think like this part, you guys are really good with making your HTTP calls to the back end. It's just a matter of how am I supposed to build out the front end, and how do I pass this information around? So thanks, guys. We're able to get the ID. I was able to get it all the way up from the home controller. That's one way to do it. Rachel also suggested there's a user stored in the auth controller. Feel free to access it that way too. And now let's go ahead and find our list ID number. Okay. So now, for those following along, my missing piece now is how to grab list ID number. That's my missing link. All right, so to be honest, that's it with my form. My form looks good, so maybe I can grab, Yep, let's see. You know what? What do we want to do? What do we want to do? You know what? I don't want this ID number here. Because if I think about it, if I post to just the current user in their lists, I don't really need the ID number. I could just find the user and push this list item into it. So you know what? Let's go ahead and take that route. So that eliminates the need for my needing an ID, which means I don't need my list ID here. So let's go ahead and build out this HTTP route. If you want to do it that way, you can. It's actually an extra step, and it's unnecessary at this point. So users, I know my user ID is listed under ID. Feel free to use, again, string literals. And we want to hit that route. So no more ID. Make sure your route matches up. And if we're successful, we're going to get this put route accessed. So .then function response. And let's just log the response. All right, so we're saying when we click and submit the form, it's going to make a post request. If all three are linked up together, we're going to see this. If that's the case, then I think you guys can do it. I'll also post up the solution for this so you can see how the rest of the app works. All right, did I save everything? You know what? Can someone write a script that just auto saves everything? That might help. That could also be a bad idea though. So maybe never mind.
There is one for Adam. Somebody told me to add it, but I wasn't sure. I hadn't heard of anybody here doing that.
Really? Oh man, post that again in the debugging channel. I will definitely look into that. I think like from coding along with you guys, 90% of my errors is because I didn't save the page. Anyway, so here we go. I clicked add to list. My console log shows my users currently logged in, and I see all three pieces are connected. And it's just a matter of sending in the correct data, saving it to our database, and moving on. All right, so.
Hey, Christine.
Yeah.
You need to start the Get lesson in a little bit.
Yeah, so this is me with my final words.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, guys, so that concludes this morning. I will post up the solution for you guys so you can see it. I want to take another fist to 5, 0 baiting. I just woke up, that put me to sleep. And 5 being, wow, you know what? I think I can make an awesome Unit 3 project. So could I get a fist to 5 after this morning session? 1, 2, 2, 2. Okay, great. All right, so this will be up for your reference.